What's up, Penn State fans? It's BWI Live on Wednesday, February 18th. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We have a lot to get to today. Per the usual, some recruiting news to start the show with. We're not going to steal the thunder from Ryan and Sean on Thursday's BWI Live recruiting show, but we will at least get the news to you. On this edition of BWI Live, we're going to dive into the defensive tackle battle for Penn State as our spring practice preview continues. The Nittany Lions now about a month and a week away from starting spring practice. It'll be here before we know it, T. Frank. And then we'll get into some best bets later in the show and also some Penn State wrestling talk as the Nittany Lions get ready to wrap up the 2025-2026 regular season. T. Frank, happy February 18th to you, buddy. Hope you're doing well.
Yeah, happy February to you as well. And the reason we're not doing a full wrestling show this week is because someone had to go on vacation this week.
That's right. I eagerly await that
opportunity. Well earned for Greg, for sure.
Yes, but we will still have wrestling coverage on Friday night. Penn State and Princeton should be about an hour and 20 minutes, I think, at Rec Hall. So that should be a quick one for Penn State to wrap up the regular season. The key, T. Frank, will be Penn State avoiding another regular season finale with a key injury. So we'll see how all that shakes out. Yeah,
that's been a trend the last couple of years. By the way, I always envy you guys for planning these things appropriately for the middle of February. I never think. I just keep like, I look up one day and I'm like, oh, it's February. Although we don't do a lot of traveling. So like, being stuck in the house with no work is actually worse for me than being able to do something, go somewhere, have some fun. So look forward to when it's warm outside. I thought it was supposed to be like, I think we're supposed to get some snow this weekend, but anyway, no one cares about the weather. Let's talk about some football.
Let's do it. All right. Overnight, I guess late last night on Tuesday, Wednesday, February 17th, top class of 2027 quarterback, Tabor Academy, Massachusetts, 4-star Peter Bourque, decommitted from Michigan. He had been on the Wolverines list of commitments in the class of 2027 since August of last year of 2025, but he's opened things up. This is a name familiar to many Penn State fans. Obviously, he's a guy that Penn State was in the mix for and has had a long-standing relationship with prior to his commitment to the Wolverines, and there's a lot of change in Ann Arbor. The GM there is now out. Obviously, Kyle Whittingham, former longtime Utah head coach, is now in at the helm of the Wolverines program. I don't have a complete list of changes otherwise to that staff, but I'm sure they're pretty numerous in terms of the coordinators, quarterbacks coach, so on and so forth. So for Bourque, he decides to open things up. And obviously that's very good news for Penn State. I'm sure that Virginia Tech, James Franklin, Danny O'Brien are in the running here. There's obviously some other schools. They're going to be very interested in him. But Penn State, T. Frank, I think at least initially, the guys will talk about it a lot more in depth tomorrow, but can lean on its development of Brock Purdy while at Iowa State, can lean on its development of Rocco Becht while at Iowa State. And obviously with him being a 27 guy, the 26 season can help Penn State play, or be a big part of Penn State's pitch for Peter Bourque as the Rivals 300-member top 50 recruit continues his process.
Yeah, and we were thinking maybe there'd be something with 2026 and Michigan that would shake loose for Penn State, but 2027 with the quarterback change or with the coach changeover, I mean, having a quarterback for this cycle open up his commitment is a big deal. Like, this is something that has been kind of a hole in the perceived roster that they could build is what are the quarterback options? Where are they in terms of relationship with these guys? So it's one of the first good news developments for Penn State in the class of 2027 with an elite talent. And Peter Bourque, we've watched him, develop as a quarterback over the last couple of years. And the Penn State staff before was ready to target him early on before he was, a high 4-star, and he's kind of maintained that. Some of these guys, we talk about them early. They're ranked as a 4-star initially because, as a sophomore, they're 6'2", and a lot of quarterbacks are 5'11", and suddenly those guys grow because different growth spurts during puberty happen at different times, and suddenly you're not the biggest, tallest, strongest arm quarterback in the class of 2027, but Bourque has really kept up because he was always a good prospect from the fundamentals perspective too. So really, this is good news, positive news for Penn State fans who have been kind of feeling lost in the desert, wandering for 40 days and 40 nights trying to find some positive news in recruiting when it's been kind of a slow start for the staff. So I think more than anything, that's a kind of a jolt for the positivity of the fans as much as it is a development for Penn State specifically. It's a development
Right.
for anyone who wants Peter Bourque, right?
Yes, and there are a lot of teams that will want Peter Bourque, standout Massachusetts cornerback, 4-star in the class of 2026, according to the Rivals industry ranking. So much more to come on him during Thursday's BWI Live Show. Be here at 10 o'clock as Ryan and Sean and T. Frank kick around Peter Bourque and the other recruiting news of the day, but felt like we had to at least address that off the top of this show. Bourque, obviously, a new target, or a new available target, I guess you could say, although they're all technically available until they sign at the school of their choice. But at any rate, Peter Bourque, a name that is picking up steam, obviously, with Penn State and others now that he has officially decommitted from Michigan. So if you're out there, please like and subscribe to the video. I see about 50 of you are in for the early portion of the show. If you have any questions, we certainly have some room in the rundown today to get to those. So let us know if you have any thoughts, questions in the comments. We always appreciate those. And again, if you can like and subscribe to the video, that always helps as well. Z-Man, always a regular. Good morning to you too.
Yeah.
Today's show, like we said in the topic, and I'm trying to change tabs here and segue the show, and it doesn't always go all that well. But yeah, we are looking at that's what I was looking for, the defensive tackles under the direction of new Penn State defensive line coach. I'm gonna butcher it. It's one of those mornings, so we'll get around to him. But new defensive line coach, new defensive staff here, obviously for Penn State, and a lot of new defensive tackles specifically in the room here for the Nittany Lions to work with. So, T. Frank, let me start with this. Let's just go back to December 2025, the day after the Pinstripe Bowl, to now. What is your overall assessment of where this room was then and where it is in whatever capacity you want to describe it by now?
So we knew there was going to be change because they were losing a lot of veterancy out of the room, and there had not been any upward mobility really other than from Xavier Gilliam, and that was the primary player you wanted to keep in the fold for the upcoming year. That didn't happen. So it was really like, what do you want to maintain? Well, you don't want to maintain anything because there wasn't necessarily anything to maintain. But the direction they went in was vastly, significantly different than what we are used to. Valuing guys that are pure nose tackles, guys that have size, guys that have length. We'll get into it. Akaika Malloy is who you're thinking of earlier, the defensive tackle coach specifically. There's been a real evolution here in that the first coach they hire is actually the interior defensive line coach, and then Christian Smith comes in as the edge rushers coach. And just as a reference, because people tend to get confused about this, edge rusher doesn't mean something different than defensive end. Defensive end and outside linebacker used to be the designations for different systems and different things where people that primarily rush the passer. The industry, football in general, is like, these are stupid distinctions that don't matter anymore. What is your job? If you're rushing off the edge, you're an edge rusher. That's what that term means. It means anyone who's on the end of the line of scrimmage who primarily attacks the quarterback. We all know what they look like. So just as a stupid clarification here, but Akaika Malloy, he's going to coach the defensive tackles. One of the most veteran coaches on this roster in terms of his experience and the amount of players he's put into the NFL, the amount of guys he's coached over the years. And so that, I think, to me, that was an emphasis on changing not just the style of the room, but also the priorities of the defensive line all around. And we sit here in February with a much different and I think cleaner and clearer picture of what Penn State's going to be in the future than where we were in December. I'm interested to see where this goes. After watching the same plan for 12 years work for the most part, we'll see if they can hit some higher highs with this group. And I think that's, as much as it is like these are not the same like superstar potential players, the potential for them to play better as a unit at a very specific role, which we'll hear in just one second, is the plan. And I think that it's something that you can maybe lower the threshold and then increase the productivity, if that makes sense. I'm kind of like trying to explain it on the fly where I'm thinking of it myself for the first time of how to nutshell my thoughts on this new direction and how it could help Penn State.
What do you think of the two-coach approach to the defensive line? One of the things Matt Campbell said about 3 weeks ago, at this point, whenever we were off the air for the Wednesday news conference, I think that was 3 weeks ago at this point. But he said that they need, at this point, in 2026, I'm paraphrasing here, but in 2026 college football, you need two coaches for the defensive line. What was your take from that perspective and the fact that he went this route with his first Penn State staff?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's absolutely fair. There is a parallel to the offensive line, and the offensive line has one coach, right? But they have one coach because they're, kind of offensive game plans and run games. There's a lot of interaction between offensive linemen. It's a different world. So you have different priorities, you have not different techniques, but you have different ways of executing those techniques on the interior versus the exterior. And for the last couple of cycles, Penn State's defensive line coach has been a defensive end coach who also coaches defensive tackles. Got somebody who prioritized and had experience and expertise. Deion Barnes was a defensive end, right? And
last year they had two of them in Torrance Brown and Deion Barnes.
Yeah, and so Penn State had gone to having support staff that were defensive interior coaches, but to have two defensive line coaches who were the lead guy at a Power 4 level to make sure you're maximizing the opportunity to get as much out of interior guys as guys on the edge, I think makes a ton of sense. Because, one of the problems, let's be honest, one of the problems in the transition between Jim Knowles and, Manny Diaz and Tom Allen was technique on the interior. How do you take on defense? How do you take on double teams? How do you survive that initial surge? They started working on stuff once Terry Smith took over that they weren't working on in front of us anyway, I should say, in front of us, emphasizing the defensive tackles and how you do that got better as the season went on. Now, they also changed the technique and what they were trying to do on the defense, so I don't want to overemphasize this, but it was a problem in the transition of also hey, are we coaching... are you going to a knee to take on, are you getting skinny through the gap? What are you doing to take on double teams in order to make sure you don't get blown off the ball? And so I think it makes a ton of sense. And the question I have is, when you have a guy like Malloy, who's had players in the past that have been productive interior pass rushers, are you going to see that at Penn State eventually? Or is this going to be kind of the same deal where before, their role is stopping the run? And we'll just get to that now. That's what he talked about here of what's the role of the defensive tackles? Why do you want more size? Why have they gone this direction? Here's what he had to say during our winter media day. And once again, I apologize. We were doing it what sounded like a cafeteria.
In terms of schematically, I know that Coach Lynn will still come up with a scheme to fit it, but we are into eating up gaps and protecting Coach Veit's guys. This is really built for linebackers to make plays. If we can do our job, then we should have really, really good linebackers that are making tackles for loss over and over again.
From UCLA, but how much does it help to have guys in that system who are 24, 25 years old to tackles as opposed to guys who are 18 or 19?
Absolutely. I was just saying that they're already teaching. So they came in right away. Those guys know that they played for me, so they're running drills on Saturday. Those guys are working out right now on Saturdays. And they're meeting together because all my drill work are on the hot folders.
So that gives you a little bit of an insight and indication as to how Penn State, with its new coaching staff, went about both building its defensive tackle, defensive line room in the portal, and also how those guys are getting going here as winter workouts continue at Penn State. It's interesting to me, T. Frank. It really is. I think you hit the nail on the head not that long ago here on the BWI Live Show for Wednesday, February 18th. But after, and this goes to a lot of position groups, but specifically this defensive tackle situation, after 12 years of seeing a pretty similar plan, it's very interesting to see a different one, and it'll be fun to watch how it all unfolds. Before we get into the guys who you broke down on film for our deeper look at the defensive tackle room, Austin Clark in the chat says, T. Frank, what is your favorite position group to break down film for? Seems like DT may not have as much nuance as some others, but I could be wrong. We can answer the first part of that question later in the show if time permits, T. Frank, but the DT part of this, just breaking down defensive tackle film, fill Austin in a little bit on your process for that.
So here's the thing. I know a lot of people that are smarter than me and have more experience will go into the technique of hand placement and foot placement and et cetera, the minute details. I never play defensive tackle. I'm not a defensive line coach. Primarily what I'm trying to do is understand what's the plan, did they execute that plan? And that goes to gap accountability. And then in the gap accountability, I will point out at times, did you get your helmet to the correct side of the offensive lineman or whatever. Like, some general things without getting to your third index finger needs to be inside the pad and into the crotch of the arm so that you can control, and then you'll use your pointer, like those sort of things, the crazy detail that like all pro defensive tackles in the NFL get to. We're trying to teach like 101. And so like what I'm trying to explain with the defensive tackles is, are they holding their gaps? What is the offense trying to do to them? And did they accurately defend that to get into their gap properly? Now, when it gets to, kind of defensive line games and things like that, it's a little bit more interesting. So it is, you don't just scout defensive tackles. For me, like I don't scout just defensive tackles. I'm scouting the defense and then their context within it. So it's never just like the talent of the one player. You have to understand the whole thing to understand their part of it and to know whether or not they're doing their job. So it gets a little complex and a little in-depth, and it's always nice when you got an ass kicker because it's just very obvious that they're doing a good job and that you don't
I can
have
scout
to
that guy. I can take care of that guy. Yeah.
Right. I always joke, we're in draft season, right? And so we're getting everyone's hot take on every football player, and it's like, yeah, any a-hole can point to the biggest, fastest, and strongest football player. Everyone can visibly see those players, but how do they apply their skills? And in the context of what they're doing, is it impressive? Or is it like they were set up for some easy stuff and they have some inflated numbers and everyone loves stats to back up, like, I like this player because X. So I'm trying to like put all this in context, and with defensive tackles, it can be harder because their job is not always, as Malloy pointed out, their job is not always to make the tackle, to make the play. I wouldn't say defensive tackle is my favorite to scout. I don't know which one would be. For as much as I say I don't like running the ball.
I'm going to take kicker, long snapper, and punter off the list. So I'll eliminate those for you, and you can go from there.
I think maybe I enjoy the offensive line as a whole the most, believe it or not. There's a lot of nuance there. There's a lot to chew on. And it's why, like, I get impatient with people that are like, just run the football. Like, it's the easier thing. Now, it is the safer, in the sense that you're more likely to get 2 yards than 0 yards because incompletions are a real thing in the passing game. But there's nothing easy about the run game. It is a complex, intricately designed ballet in which you're physically fist fighting the person across from you. And you still have to execute these steps accurately and precisely with your teammates. So I think offensive line in general is one of the more interesting ones to do. Receiver can be really boring because they're just running routes and sometimes they get the football. So yeah, I'd say offensive line probably is the most fun for me. Get the most, the quickest. I like that.
Yes, fair enough. Good way to put it. All right, let's get back to the defensive tackle situation for Penn State. If you pulled up the Nittany Lions roster, you would notice very quickly that this is one of the position groups that is heaviest on newcomers. The only returnees from the 2025 roster at defensive tackle are Ty Blanding, Liam Andrews, of course, and DeAndre Cook. So not a ton of experience back at this position for Penn State, which is why they went and found it in the portal. And T. Frank, in your mind, there's two guys from the portal who are very likely to be the ones leading the way for this Penn State defensive tackle group when they take the field for the first time for spring ball in about a month. Also, Austin, thanks for that question, buddy. You got T. Frank going on defensive tackles, offensive linemen. That's always a good way to spend a few minutes on the show. But yeah, two starters, it looks like, or at least guys that in theory should be at the top of the pecking order, are both newcomers. Go ahead.
So that's what Malloy was outlining, is we want to stop the run. We want to keep the linebackers clean. And to do that, you need to have big physical defensive tackles. Well, you don't get much bigger than 6'5", 320 with Keanu Williams. Also, let's point out the fact that Siale Tupaki and Williams have both played in this defense before with D'Anton Lynn in 2023. Now, I don't think either were full-time starters at that point. Williams was more of a starter, but I think he might have gotten hurt that year. Anyway, doesn't matter. They've both had exposure to this defense, and I asked him, like, how important is it to have, and what I meant was, like, Keanu Williams is in his 6th year. Siale Tupaki, this will be his 8th year in college football. That's a ridiculous amount of time in college football. It's also an advantage that these guys are in their early or, at a certain point, mid-20s. as opposed to 18-year-old defensive tackles. They're physically at their maturation point. Like, they're mostly done. And no football player is done being physically like adaptive. You're always going to be trying to get bigger, faster, stronger, even in the NFL. You're always trying to refine your athleticism. But like, you're not physically getting any bigger at a certain point. You've maximized your potential to grow in the weight room, at least the easy growth you're going to get as a young person being exposed to all that stuff. That's all done. And so if you're trying to get guys that are big physical run stoppers, it's hard to beat 24 and 25-year-olds, guys that are older, stronger, and have been in the system. And Siale Tupaki, Keanu Williams are already teaching the other players on the roster this defense. And that's what Malloy, he was talking about. It's great that I don't have to be the only one teaching. They're getting a precursor in this particular defense because these guys already know it. So those two at the top, if you're saying who has the leg right now in February, the leg up on the starting positions, I would say those are the two guys that have, presumed starters, penciled in starters here at the beginning of spring ball. But the question is, like, when you're that old and in college football, it's not like there's a lot of like easy upside. There's not a lot of growth to be done from guys that have so many snaps and have spent so long on this level that you're wondering what's the upside for the defense, and that's really where the other players come in into this conversation.
Yeah, so Bradley asked, just to clean this up quick, it's a very obvious and fair question, asking about how does Tupaki have is this going to be his 8th season? Well, you have a COVID year that didn't count in 2020. You have, I believe, one medical red shirt, if not two, or a medical red shirt and a red.
So he explained it, the COVID year, and then he had a knee injury that happened where he lost a year. He re-aggravated the same injury and then lost a second year. So they counted that basically as one injury, losing 2 years.
Right.
And so then you get your redshirt season. Now he's at 5 years plus 3 is 8.
Yes, and so if you look at his bio on Penn State Athletics website, obviously 7 games in 2020, or they never existed for the intents and purposes of the eligibility tracker. 21 and 22 played in a total of 2 games combined. 23, only 7 games, 12 games in 2024, and also 12 games last year. So pretty interesting player, older guy, and I think that, we've seen that recipe work before, not always, but, just think back to last season and some of the guys that Penn State could have used from that 2024 defensive tackle room in 2025. And some of those reasons why they could have used those guys is that they were older, more experienced guys, maybe not top of the line players or draft prospects or whatever, but certainly very serviceable and maybe get more miles out of their abilities because of their experience, their age, their strength, so on and so forth. So, yeah, those two guys at the top make sense. And I think you made a good point, too, about the fact that that Penn State has these two guys who are able to teach on the days the coaches can't be there. And they're obviously experienced guys. They're not first-year guys that are just learning the system alongside their teammates. They've been here. They know what it is. They've been not here, but they've been around the guys who are now here and coaching it. So that certainly helps as well.
And these guys were good at being run stuffers in their career. So that's the other thing that's important is there's proven production at what they're being asked to do. Keanu Williams also had some injuries in his career. I believe how he also gets a 6th year of eligibility. He was a 2022 guy, I think. Or no. I don't remember what year he was, but I don't think COVID was part of this. So anyway, he's had some injuries in his career, and when he is healthy, I think he's a dynamic run stopper where he is big, physical. At 6'5", he can play with good pad level. The thing that you worry about with these guys is just the number of injuries they've had. As the big as they are, those do tend to take a toll on your athleticism overall. Williams is never going to be a dynamic player, but I don't think they necessarily need him to be in this particular system. They've been very clear. His job is to make it very hard for guards to get to the second level on double teams and make sure that the linebackers are clean so they can shoot gaps, they can get in the backfield, and they can chase things down laterally. Tupaki is the guy that has a little more athleticism, little more laterally agile, and has shown a little bit more power as a bull rusher to have some pressure, but I'm not expecting a whole lot of pass rush from either of these guys. So they are what they are, and this is what I'm trying to say, like, they could raise the level of it's very, very hard to run on the Penn State defense if the defensive ends and the linebackers all do their jobs, and I expect those linebackers who are experienced to do their jobs. Comes down to the defensive ends, right? But generally, I expect this defense, if there's one thing they do well, they are not going to be easy to run up the middle on. That's the plan. And so if they do that, they can raise the level of players around them and be kind of this, kind of the heartbeat of the defensive line that makes them have an identity. Even if you aren't superstars, which we'll get to in a little bit later in the show, if you have an identity that is, even against the best teams, it holds up where no one can run up the middle on these guys and they're athletic enough to chase things down, that's going to take something away from the offense and allow you to deploy resources elsewhere. If there's one thing I saw from USC last year, D'Anton Lynn didn't have good. Had to put an enormous amount of resources into stopping the run. So they brought in big physical nose tackles and, SEC defensive tackles to try and get bigger in the trenches. They had a 5-man front where the smallest guy was 265 pounds. And they still struggled to stop the run. They tried 4-3. They tried 5-2. They tried everything. They had 6-man defensive lines. And they struggled to stop the run. So what was the priority for D'Anton Lynn this offseason coming to Penn State? He got some giant dudes that can stop the run who had done it for him before, by the way. So I think that was, that identity, that need in this defense, I think what they are doing is building a foundation for the rest of the defense to work around. And I think they accomplished that. I know these aren't superstars. I know they're not great in terms of are they going to be dominant? Are they going to be the NFL? They're going to be first? No. But do they do the job they're asked to at a very high level? I do think they can accomplish that. Now, will they get beat sometimes? Sure. I don't think they're going to be, there's a limit to that part as well. But I think generally on this level, they are going to be good at stopping the run.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that, or at least they should be. And if they're not, then the
that's a problem.
Chat that's pretty quiet and calm right now is going to be really angry with you on September 5th, I believe it is, when Penn State hosts Marshall. And if Marshall is able to run the ball, you're going to have some angry chatters with you in the post-game show. But anyway, there'll be plenty of time to talk about that. Let's get into the guys that are battling for snaps. And I see how you have your list formatted here. If I could just change it up on you and start with Tyreek Blanding. He's apparently up to 290 pounds now, the top Penn State returning defensive tackle. Not going to be mistaken for Xavier Gilliam in terms of the production he has had so far in his Penn State career. But I thought it was notable that when Matt Campbell was doing that, I forget how Natick said it yesterday, but that part of the news conference a few weeks ago where he was asked to do a rundown of the names of note on the roster, and he said he wasn't going to, and then he did the Cale Sanderson
he did the whole thing.
Did the whole roster, yes. So I thought it was really interesting. He could have, spat out any name he wanted to during that defensive tackle part of his conversation. One of them was Ty Blanding, saying, will he take the next step? That's going to be great to watch. I don't want to overstate it, T. Frank, but I think it's crucial that Ty Blanding takes the next step for the health overall of this Penn State defensive tackle room in 2026.
Yeah, and they're in no particular order. They're just what came to mind when I was trying to do this off the top of my head. Ty Blanding is the guy that they retained with the athleticism from the Penn State style of doing things previously. He's an elite athlete. Watching him play in person, I try not to overvalue being in person, but watching some of those scrimmages we saw last year where they would do run stuff with, us present, he's unbelievably athletic. I'd say just below kind of the Zane Durant kind of freaky athlete playing running back in high school. Ty Blanding's not far off of that. The difference is he didn't necessarily play the run as well. That's going to be a problem. If he does not take that next step, then all that movement and that versatility skill might not matter. But here's the exciting thing about a guy like Tyreek Blanding for Penn State is now you have those plug and play defensive tackles in the middle that are going to eat up a bunch of space, right? Now Tyreek Blanding doesn't have to do that in the plan. So if you want to do something and have a versatile front where he's now playing basically one-on-one with an offensive tackle in the run game on. That's a better situation for him. You might get some more one-on-ones for him where he can try and shoot a gap or he can try and make a tackle. As a pass rusher, I think arm length is really important, but it's more than that because we've seen guys that have great length that just don't know how to rush the passer. That's another thing where Kaika Malloy has done a great job previously of setting guys up to succeed when you have the talent to succeed. And Blanding has the athleticism to succeed. Malloy focuses on defeating the hands of an offensive lineman, studying an offensive lineman to find their tendencies and find their weaknesses, and then looking at the fronts, how an offensive line, their game plan, they block to create situations for guys to win. That's going to be a game changer for Ty Blanding if he can actually make good on all of that stuff. He's the guy really of this group that has, the ability and the potential to be a disruptor from what we'll just generally label a 3-technique style. They're going to play left, right. It's not going to matter 3-technique, 1-technique, but the ability to be an obnoxious athlete, to move around, to be frustrating for the offensive line. That's what he has to be on this group. He has to be the athleticism with a bunch of dudes that are massive run stoppers. And so he is critical, and I understand why Matt Campbell would single him out, because if you have that element, now you've changed the dynamic where you can't just say, well, the defensive tackles at Penn State are one thing. Now you've got versatility up there.
Yeah, and one thing I ask about with Ty Blanding with Malloy, give me the pronunciation of that one more time, T. Frank.
Malloy.
Yes, thank you. He said he's athletic as can be, and he said a lot of the things that we will teach or I will teach, it'll be a little bit unorthodox, so there'll be some type of unlearning to learn, but I think when it's all said and done, I think we'll be pleased with what Ty will be doing in spring ball. That unorthodox, we'll have a story up at bluewhiteillustrated.com later this week where you can check it out for $1 and see what he is talking about there. But essentially, he has a little bit of a different approach than what he believes other defensive line coaches do. One thing I thought was interesting, T. Frank, no bag drills. He's like, I've never seen a bag drill on Saturday, so we don't do bag drills, which was obviously it's been part of football practices forever. So, but they have a lot of hope for Ty Blanding. We'll see if he can realize it. The other 3 guys you have listed here is obviously battling for snaps, T. Frank. The depth guys are clearly Liam Andrews and DeAndre Cook. We'll see if they can make a move going into spring practice, but at least there's 3 other guys on this roster we have seen college football production for: Elijah Carnell, Dallas Vicala, and Armstrong. I don't know why I didn't just let you share these guys' names, because it's just run it down for us. Yes.
So I would say the 2 guys that I think of this list are more interesting are Armstrong Nadim, who's he's Tyreek Blanding size, but on the other side of the coin, where he is an elite run stuffer. I think you and I were both there when Ryan Clanton, Penn State's offensive line coach, was saying, hey, I was scouting somebody, and by the way, you want a guy for the defensive line? How about this dude from Oklahoma State we had to play? Because he was an absolute unit for the Cowboys last year. 6'2", 290. He played nose tackle as a redshirt freshman at that size, which, just so you know, again, he's Ty Blanding size, and he's dominating one-on-ones and double teams on the interior, because he's got the Python arm look, where it's just there is no difference between his wrist and his forearm and his elbow and then a giant bicep. It is just he looks like pistons at the ends of his shoulders. The dude is just absolutely fit at 290. So that's going to be the question, is what's the upside when he's asked to do more than hold one gap? Because he was very much, there's different styles, right? So the attacking style of defense that Penn State used previously, then you have some kind of read and react defenses, and then you got defensive lines that are just hey, we want you to be in this gap, full stop. Take your guy, put him in the other gap, you're in this gap, now you just stand there. And that was more of what they asked out of him at Oklahoma State. They're going to ask a little bit more out of him in this defense, and the question is, can he be a Tyreek Blanding adjacent athlete with power? Carnell, I thought was going to be more of a defensive end, but at 6'5", he's already over 300 pounds. He was not done growing based on what I thought of him. I thought he would be more of kind of that lean power defensive end. I think they want to get him up to about 315 and be behind Tupaki in the lineup. He's, to me, I know I just said Tyreek Blanding has the most athleticism and the most upside, but upside can be measured in different ways. Carnell's a great athlete for his size. He's quick at 6'5". He's got great pad level. He was recruited to be in that 3-3-5 defense for Iowa State, and now he's not going to have to play and tackle at the same time. He's going to have more of a defined position. I think he's got more athleticism when you play him strictly on the inside and you make him a full-size defensive tackle. That might be the guy that has the most complete level of upside of size, movement, quickness, all those things. But like he's learning a new defense and he's a younger defensive tackle. So those are the two guys I think are going to have the most immediate pressure on the top two to take snaps. And then the wild card here is Blanding, and Vakalahi is a former Utah defensive tackle who did go on a mission. So he is also a much older dude, despite his eligibility. But I think there's some quickness there, but he's pretty raw. I'm not assuming he's going to be like the number 3 defensive tackle this year.
Right. And so I think that is really a good summation of where this defensive tackle position group is at going into the spring. If you listen to the last, obviously, 20 minutes of T. Frank breaking these guys down, there's a lot of promise here, a lot of projection, a lot of guys who are older and more experienced and should, in theory, be stronger because of that. But, you know, there's still questions, I think, about it translating all of it to the Big Ten, and especially in this new look defense. And so, you know, let's get to the last two guys then as guys that could make a role or a move into spring practice. Liam Andrews and DeAndre Cook. Liam Andrews, a board favorite over at the Lions Den message board at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Also here in the chat, T. Frank. Just let's start with him and where you think he could go in 2026.
I don't know. Truthfully, he's been injured and not learning the position. So he's a guy that played offensive line.
Maybe it's a good thing, considering all the things that have changed. Maybe he'll just take this new learnings and run with it.
Right, and it might fit him better. You know, as a guy, I thought he looked uncomfortable trying to play defensive tackle in an attacking style. So basically, when you're a defensive tackle, you need to be more athletic than the offensive line. Right. And as an offensive lineman, he was powerful, he was athletic, he had great potential, but he wanted to play defensive line. And so, like, you were banking on that athleticism of being able to play tackle and then, you know, offensive tackle, transitioning to being a big framed mover in the middle. But his balance looked wrong every time I saw him. There is a correlation here to the offensive lineman transferred out from the class of 2023 recently, who was the guy, Alex Burkmeyer. I think there's a correlation to the struggles Burkmeyer had and the struggles that Andrew has, not from an aggression standpoint, but from a balance standpoint. I thought Liam Andrews struggled with feel for the position and balance for the position the last time I saw him. And it's been very small, you know, number of snaps. So if he learns and he gets a better feel for the position, he's got time to develop, there's an opportunity that he can shoot up in the conversation here. But I mean, I don't see a path right now. He's gonna have to make a path, and you know, that's entirely possible. But if you're saying, like, yes, he's athletically talented, but there's a lot of other stuff missing. There's a lot of things he's got to build in that profile. That athleticism, you know, doesn't necessarily. It doesn't matter, you know, if you don't have a good feel for the position and you don't have good balance, and the aggression is not the problem. So I guess I'm saying a lot of words to say, like, I'm not optimistic that he's going to make a push this year, but long term, I think he's still got the opportunity to be a role player for Penn State.
All right. Well, that is a look at the Penn State defensive tackle group. Do you have any final thoughts on DeAndre Cook this year?
No.
I
would just say it's funny. We've been having conversations about the defensive line, and for years, Penn State fans have been saying, like, they need to get bigger. They need to get bigger. They're too small. Now they're bigger, and everyone's like, well, where's all the athleticism?
Right.
It's always the grass is greener where you were just standing. Now, the difference is, like, the people complaining have changed. You know, and so, like, there's no one opinion for all Penn State football fans, but it just goes to show that there's no right way to do this. There's no one way to do this. Everyone would love to have Jalen Carter, or if everyone remembers the Williams wall in Minnesota, Kevin and Pat Williams. Everyone would love to have just the best at everything.
Sure.
But you don't always have that. And so you need to make a plan of what are the traits we want, what are we going to focus on, and how are we going to use those. And, like, I get the plan. I think the plan here is solid, and they've got the guys to execute it.
All right, well, we'll see how it works out. Learn a lot more about this group during spring practice when Penn State takes the field for drill number 1 in about a month and a half from today. But that's T. Frank's look at the Penn State defensive tackle position group. And I think that ultimately, T. Frank, the strength of this group, will be in, like you said, be able to stop the run. Does it hold up well enough against the pass? Can it chase guys down at the line of scrimmage, so on and so forth? I think that is a part of the questions left to be answered. But you're right. I have noticed the conversation about the body type changes going toward what a lot of people demanded during much of the last 12 years, and now are questioning why they went that way. So it is an interesting offseason conversation to have.
Z-Man says he needs to kick butt in the weight room. I think he's talking about Liam Andrews.
Liam Andrews, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to try and describe this to you in a visual sense so that you understand kind of what I'm trying to say here. The movement patterns of a defensive lineman are different. The style of movement is different. Offensive line is controlled. It's small steps. It's keeping your balance while trying to hit a moving target. Defensive line, I think of like guys like Abdul Carter or great defensive linemen on the interior. They have a forward momentum about them that is like a sprinter, right? And so if you've ever tried to, actually the technique of sprinting makes it feel like you're falling over while running forward. You've got to have the balance and the attunement in your body to control that momentum and change it at a moment's notice. I liken it to like predators. You look at the way that like big cats stalk their prey. That's the movement pattern you want from like a defensive end, right? Those athletic, nimble, aggressive, explosive, violent movement skills that are not inherently natural to an offensive lineman. So I'm not saying he's slow. I'm not saying that he's unathletic. I'm saying that the way he controls his body, what I saw of him last time, his weight, his chest was so far over his toes that he's falling over or he's not creating the power and the impact he needs to because he's not moving the way you see a defensive lineman move. And so that's what I'm talking about, of learning the position from that aspect. And maybe I'm going too much into detail here and somebody's going to, but like that's my observation about this when it comes to like how you want guys to move on the defensive line. There's just a different way of doing it. And that's what he needs to learn. At least, from the limited snaps we saw from him at the end of games, that is kind of where he needs to develop as a football player. And it doesn't have anything to do with his athleticism. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that he's a 4-star and is an incredibly talented athlete. It's how he's using those skills haven't necessarily translated to the style of play on defense.
How crazy is it driving you to not know as much as you would like to know about what's going on inside the Lash Building weight room and Haluba Hall winter workout sessions?
A lot.
As you were talking, it kind of dawned on me that this may be something that bugs you a little bit, like Cale Sanderson is bugged by the way the Hodge Trophy voting works. So I just wanted to throw that out there for your thoughts.
Yeah, because all of this stuff matters of how you're training. How are you training these guys? Because you want to be training them for the position that they're going to be playing later on in the year. And so, the decisions about what weight do you want these guys to be? You're going to lift differently, and you're going to lift more aggressively when it comes to hypertrophy or power, whatever it might be, based on what you're trying to build the athlete into. And some of those changes for the defensive line are incredibly important that you're doing right now, on top of like just the grind of trying to like condition guys and get them back into football shape in the offseason. So absolutely, there's a lot of information that goes into the weight room that then translates to the football field in the spring. And it is the biggest gap in knowledge between fans and us and what's going on inside the room right now, and also the biggest knowledge gap for us of we just don't know, some of these decisions, some of the things that are going on right now.
Yeah, I really thought it was interesting. Another story, I'll just keep previewing things we have coming at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where you can join for $1. I talked to Terry Smith, among other Penn State assistant coaches, T. Frank, about the differences he's noticed between the last strength staff and this one. And one of the things he said was, I met with all my corners in early February, and those guys feel like there's a greater demand in the weight room. Their approach is different. In this case, it's not like it was a bad thing, but change is good, and it's refreshing our guys. So we'll learn more about that in the days and weeks ahead, T. Frank. But certainly different approaches across this program, and whether it's right, wrong, better, worse, we're not going to know for a while, but it will be interesting to find out for sure.
Yeah, this is, again, that kind of confirms what we've been talking about. Matt Campbell wants a bully for a football team. He wants strength at every single position. He wants power at every, and so that tracks. You know, from corner to D-line, they want old school football players, and we'll see how all that translates to the field when you have guys, especially at that corner position, that are great athletes to begin with, and now, like, what are you asking of them in the weight room to decide what are the traits they're going to exhibit later? Because here's the funny thing, Greg. I always thought, like, before I knew things, that bigger, faster, stronger was an infinite cycle. And that's true if you got steroids.
Right.
Like, that's true if you're cheating. But, like, you know, the human body has its limitations. And at a certain point when players, and truthfully, young football players can do that to a certain point because they're naturally growing into their frames of what they're going to be as adults. But once you get to a certain point, you need to make some choices. And it seems like generally Matt Campbell fits the blue-collar style of what Penn State football fans want. They want guys that are going to be physically stronger and are going to control interactions with their opponent, as opposed to the dynamic, explosive in-space athletes that Penn State had been trying to make every single player. I think that's important. I want to make this clear. I don't think that you're right in one way doing it the other. You have to make some sacrifices no matter what of how you're trying to dial your team. But I don't think every single position needs to be the apex of athleticism. And so there's got to be a blend here. I think there's some value to what Penn State did previously. I think there's a lot of value to what Penn State did previously, but we're going to see how the shift changes. All these little choices, they're going to make big differences on the football field.
Yeah, and I think Andrew makes a fair point here. Yeah, you know, of course, what would you expect Terry Smith to say now? But the last staff put a bunch of guys in the league. Chuck Losey is one of the best in the country. No arguments. Right. No arguments at all. And I think that has become one of the more, and I'm sorry, T-Frank, I'm rambling off. No,
I love this conversation. Here, but, this is perfect.
One of the most frustrating parts of the last month for me, and I think some fans might agree and some fans might think I'm crazy, but is just this constant, well, it has to be better or worse. And it's different. So it's either so much better than what was here for the last 12 years or it's worse. And I just think there's more nuance to it. There's more thought to be had. And there's a lot of firm stands being taken about things that you could be very wrong about come not even just the fall, but by the end of the spring in terms of the way that Matt Campbell and this Iowa State, mostly Iowa State, not fully Iowa State staff operate. And so it's just been something that's bugging me. And this strength and conditioning thing is yet another way where, it could be that there's just because you point out some things that the new staff does good is not putting down or speaking negatively about what was done at Penn State previously. Obviously, it worked for Penn State for a long time in the last 12 years.
Here's how I interpreted that quote. There's different things in the weight room you can do. And so the demand in the weight room, I heard that as lift heavier weights, lift more weights. That creates more strength. But there's also the ability, how fast are you moving that weight? Are you interested in moving the most weight possible, or do you want to move the most weight you can possibly move the fastest you can move it? That's a different conversation entirely. That is a very different skill set that you're training within the same context of lifting weights. And so those are the nuances kind of in the words that I was hearing when Terry Smith is describing those things, as opposed to they were taking it easy in the weight room, which is kind of the black and white binary thing you would say if you, maybe had an axe to grind because you didn't like the previous staff because of the way things ended and the way things went. So anyway.
Yeah, it just is what it is. It's going to be a part of the ongoing conversation about the offseason for Penn State, just because, again, we all knew one way for so long, and now there's a new way, and it's different, and people don't like change, or sometimes they really like change. So we will just have to wait and see. T. Frank, now that we're at this point of the hour, I assume you want to hold our previously planned next segment for Maybe a
Yeah.
future show. Yeah. Okay.
Good idea.
So we'll hold on to that. And obviously at some point down the road here, maybe as soon as next week, we'll have a look at the players who have the most star potential in this Penn State defense. I don't want to rush through that, and I feel like we would if we dive into it today, which means we are going to get the best bets on this edition of BWI Live, but it also means we're going to have some time to fill with your questions. So if you have one for us, please drop it in the chat here on YouTube. And while you're doing it, don't forget to like and subscribe. It is time for another edition of Best Bets from BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM, use bonus code ON3, and you'll get up to $1,500 new player offer on your first wager with BetMGM, plus 50% off an annual subscription to the On3 College Sports Network. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses, and your code for the 50% off an annual subscription to the On3 College Sports Network in your BetMGM inbox. Once your first bet is placed, just make sure you use bonus code ON3, letter N, 3, when you sign up at BetMGM. Make this sports season one for the history books. Make it legendary. T. Frank. There are two things I feel pretty confident about in my life as facts before this morning. The first is the fridge you can see over my shoulder here would always have Coors Light in, and that Penn State basketball would never be a favorite on BetMGM in 2025-2026. Came down this morning to do some prep work for the show. If you've watched the first 51 minutes of this, you realize it wasn't a ton, but I did prep for this segment. Opened the fridge down here to get a water out and noticed that there was no Coors Light in there. And then I sat down, opened up BetMGM, and I scroll, and lo and behold, Penn State basketball is a 4.5-point favorite tonight over Rutgers at the Bryce Jordan Center.
Pigs are flying. I can see them outside.
Yes, and it's probably very, very dark out and getting worse by the second. The end may be here. But anyway, jokes aside, Penn State basketball is a 4.5-point favorite over Rutgers tonight at the Bryce Jordan Center. Tip-off is at 6 p.m. I am assuming that's on Big Ten Network, but I'll check while I talk. I am not taking the Nittany Lions, though, here in Best Bets. And the reason is why is pretty simple. They are a better team at home. There's no doubt about that. Home and road splits seem to be better. Rutgers is obviously not very good. So the one thing that just concerns me is that as I wandered around the internet, a lot of people, I saw the Action Network posted that, this was one of their best bets of the night, Penn State minus 4.5. I don't like groupthink, T. Frank, so I'm going to go with the over. Going to go with the over. Penn State shoots it well tonight and also gives up some threes to Rutgers, which it is known well to do. And so whether Penn State comes out on top, I don't know. I'm not overly concerned about it because I think this game just sails over, and whoever makes the most threes in that process will win. So Penn State, excuse me, T. Frank. Penn State Rutgers over 148.5 is best bet number one. And then best bet number two that caught my eye this morning. This is a little bit of a different track, but we're going to stay in the Big Ten. USC home dog plus 9.5 against a top 25 Illinois team. Fighting Illini heading out west for that game, a home dog. My buddy Mike all wound up about that, so if it loses, you can blame him. But Illinois plus 9.5 is one to watch for as well. And then finally, T. Frank, last but not least, I know I said last week we would probably not have three of these during this time of the year because there's not a lot out there right now. But this one caught my eye too. So USA Women's Hockey is playing Canada in the Olympic gold medal match tomorrow at I think 1:10 p.m. Eastern time. It's never... we always start things at strange times. The Daytona 500 started back on Sunday at 2:13 p.m. I think this hockey game is going to start at like 1:11 and 37 seconds or something like that as time.
Got to make sure all the pregame sponsors get their airtime.
Yes, well, there's no doubt about that.
First 10 minutes of the broadcast.
Yep, there is no doubt about that. So, at any rate, on BetMGM, the sponsor, we're giving some airtime to right now. We appreciate them. USA Women's Hockey to win the gold medal over Canada while both Canada and USA score a goal in regulation. Yes, is minus 135. The U.S. has given up, I don't even know if it's one goal in this in this tournament. If it might, I know it's at least one, but it isn't many more. So it's a little bit of a risky bet, but I just think they'll find a way to get in, get a goal in against the USA, but the USA still wins after beating Canada earlier in this tournament. So that is the third and final best bet of the day from BetMGM. So Olympic hockey gold coming up tomorrow, and we have USC and the Penn State Rutgers over tonight. So we'll see. I believe the last time we used Penn State basketball on this show, they just didn't cover 12.5 at Washington, T. Frank. They won outright. So there was always that, which is nice.
You're a lucky token for them.
Yeah, so we'll see if that leads to an over and a Penn State win tonight. But that's it for this edition of Best Bets from BetMGM.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
All right, thanks again to BetMGM. T. Frank, did you have any of these in the chat you wanted to get to? I see you're responding to them.
Sure, like if you want to, but I didn't think it was. So go for it.
We'll just get to this one. Andrew said he's talking about Matt Campbell thinks Quentin Martin needs to add 25 pounds. That's way too much on Martin's frame. I like a small shifty back for changeup. Why have 3 big physical backs? That quote from Matt Campbell caught, and thanks for the question, Andrew. That quote from Matt Campbell caught my ear too. Never really bothered to go back and think more about it until Andrew put it in the chat here roughly 4 minutes ago at this point. But just your thought there, T. Frank, about bulking up Quentin Martin. Yeah,
I wrote about it and we talked about it yesterday. James Franklin had the same opinion. He just was not. He hadn't said it in a while. Quentin Martin 6'1". He's got a big frame. So if there's anyone who can naturally hold 215 pounds, let's just say 215. That's not an overly big back. Like big backs are 230, in my opinion. He at 205, let's just say he's 205. He doesn't have the leg drive, in my opinion, to break tackles to be as shifty and explosive as he can be. There is a balance of the heavier you are, the more explosive you need to be to carry that weight. Yeah. I think he's got that skill. So there's a whole science behind fast twitch muscles and training those versus, slow twitch muscles, which are power. And so you have to prioritize training one over the other at certain different times of the year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think he can easily handle more size and be as shifty as he is. His whole thing is he's 6'1", and he can be laterally elusive. Adding weight is going to allow him to sit into that squat deeper and be more elusive. I don't think people understand how much leg meat weighs. You carry most of your weight in your lower body. If you're an athlete, if you're built correctly, if you're built the way coaches want you to be built.
I was going to say, let's not speak for everybody here, T. Frank.
Right. That's the goal. I should say that's the goal, that you carry a lot of your lean muscle mass below the waist so that when you want to change directions and you're in a football position, it's a squat. That's what it is. Your knees are bent, you're lowering your center of gravity so that you can change directions. And doing squats is the best way to do that. Getting bigger in your lower body is the best way to do that. It's the best way to live an awesome life, by the way. Having leg strength makes everything in your life super easy. So everyone should be doing squats, but certainly to me that's Quentin Martin. He needs to be stronger in the lower half to be as elusive as he is now and be able to run through contact, because we talked about elusive numbers and breaking tackles. He has a very poor rating right now on a limited number of carries. I don't want to say anything, but I have not seen him break a ton of tackles. I've seen him get the yards that are there and use good instincts for the position to get yards. But when it comes to he's generating the yards through broken tackles, that's an area he needs to improve, and that's why you need to be bigger and stronger.
Right. Well, speaking of running through contact, we're going to close out today's show with a look at the Penn State wrestling team, who has run through another Big Ten season undefeated. The Nittany Lions beat Ohio State 36-5. Shorthanded Buckeyes team last Friday night at the Bryce Jordan Center to clinch the sixth straight dual meet Big Ten regular season title for Cale Sanderson's team. So they closed out the regular season this week with a visit from Princeton, who just got beat by Rutgers pretty handily on Monday night down in Piscataway, New Jersey. So T-Frank, another good year for Penn State wrestling with more they hope to come. And obviously at this point, the numbers just, if you've listened to the BWI Wrestling Show, are just absurd. I think I can go through. I think they just sent out an updated release of those. So I'll just rattle off a few numbers here to close things out if I can find them quickly. Penn State enters that Princeton dual T-Frank 14-0 overall, 8-0 in the Big Ten, 129-11 in bout. It's the bout record for the year. They're outscoring their opponents 580-39 with an average points per duel of 41 and a margin of victory of 38.6 with 7 shutouts on the year. That's a Cale Sanderson era record, and 99 of its 129 dual wins are for bonus points, which is absurd as well. So Penn State Wrestling getting ready to roll into the postseason. We'll be covering that here on the BWI YouTube channel. Next week, just as if you are listening this deep in and you're a listener of the BWI Wrestling Podcast, we will try and, I think, get something done next week, maybe looking ahead to pre-seeds and the regular season superlatives. And then Big Tens will be here before we know it, and so will the national tournament.
It's been fun to follow this season along, and I know I've asked you this question previously, so I won't ask you again, but it's just amazing to see, the numbers they're creating and generating are, as Steven is saying in the chat, those are impossible stats, and we're going to see just how good they are in the postseason. But they've done everything you need now to be as good as possible in the regular season. It's astounding how they went against the number 2 team and made it look like a scrimmage. It's just It's impressive.
Yeah, 6 guys ranked number 1 out of 10 starters as well, with 1 number 2, or I believe it's now. One number 2 and 1 at number 4. So, and then you have Cole Mirasola, the heavyweight, who won by upset last week, now moving into some people's top 5 or 6 as well. So the quest for 10 All-Americans yet again, and maybe as many as 6 or 7 finalists, continues for Penn State Wrestling once the postseason starts next week. First, though, they got to take on Princeton Friday night at the Rec Hall. So, T-Frank, any final thoughts for this edition of BWI Live? You texted me, but yes, it flew by this hour here on the BWI Live Show.
I think if you want more detail, I'm going to try and write something up about the defensive tackles and kind of do a mirror image over at bluewhiteillustrated.com of the points and some of the details about this particular style and some of the ways that these guys are going to interact on the front. And, coming up next couple of days, going to try and do some more film breakdown over at bluewhiteillustrated.com for the All-22, learn more about the offense, the defense, things like that.
All right. Well, that's Thomas Frank Carr. T-Frank, I'm Greg Pickle. We appreciate you staying with us here during the offseason and especially the middle of February for BWI Live. The guys are back tomorrow with an in-depth look at Penn State recruiting as we get ready to roll back into a quiet period at the end of February. But for now, the dead period is here, and this edition of BWI Live is over. More insight and intel at bluewhiteillustrated.com, where you can join for $1. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.